So clearly, we've got a player and a coach now that have two completely separate belief sets. And look, Stephanie White was angry when she made those comments. So you can bet one thing, I'm going to be watching and paying attention to Sophie Cunningham's minutes. If she all of a sudden has a reduction in minutes playing,
Picture this, the concrete hallways of the Indiana Fever Arena. The game just ended, the cameras are off. And somewhere deep inside that locker room, the voice of the most famous basketball player on the planet is absolutely erupting. Are you kidding me? Why always me? And now you're coming for Sophie? According to multiple sources leaking directly from inside the organization, Caitlin Clark didn't just get upset. She completely and utterly lost it in a way that has left coaches, front office executives, and league officials scrambling in total panic. And here's the thing. Before we go any further, I want to know something from you right now. Do you think Caitlin Clark was right to snap? Drop a yes or a no in the comments immediately, because the answer you give is going to say everything about which side of this war you're standing on. Because make no mistake, what is happening inside the Indiana Fever right now is not a disagreement. It is not a misunderstanding. It is a full-scale, no-holds-barred civil war. And the story is so much bigger, so much darker, and so much more explosive than anything the mainstream media is daring to tell you. Sophie Cunningham said something that broke the entire league in half. A coach allegedly tried to destroy her for it. The White House got involved. And then, as if that wasn't enough, a second bombshell dropped that has turned this franchise into something that looks less like a basketball team and more like a crime scene. Stay locked in, because once you hear everything, you will never look at the Indiana Fever the same way again.
Sophie Cunningham says, the article says, you say she's a MAGA Barbie. As some corners of the internet have taken to calling her, projection, she says, because of what she looks like and where she's from. She'll weigh in on how to, quote, protect women's sports, she says, because she's in that world and feels qualified to speak to that world. Quote, I got a lot of negative feedback about me hating trans, and I'm like, I never once said that, she says. I think that I'm here to extend love, but I also think with that love is truth, being honest. And I want to protect young girls in the locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Now, prior to yesterday's game, the Indiana Fever media, they flooded Sophie Cunningham. Apologize, Sophie, apologize! How dare you! And then Sophie Cunningham says,
in that story with ESPN, you talked about wanting to protect young girls who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Just can you expand your viewpoint on that?
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children.
There are players in professional sports who say what their PR team tells them to say, smile for the cameras, and collect their paychecks without ever rattling a single cage. Sophie Cunningham has never been that kind of player, and she made that crystal clear in a way that nobody inside the WNBA was even remotely prepared for. To understand what happened, you need to understand who Sophie Cunningham actually is. She's not a role player trying to keep her head down and protect her roster spot. She is a physical, fearless competitor who has built her entire reputation on refusing to back down, whether that's on the hardwood against players twice her size, or in front of a microphone with the entire sports media world staring her down. When Sophie Cunningham has something to say, she says it. And what she said recently didn't just ruffle feathers inside the league. It lit the entire building on fire. In a statement that spread across social media like wildfire, Cunningham openly came out in favor of protecting women's sports. She talked about Title IX. She talked about the importance of safeguarding biological women in competitive athletics. She talked about young girls who deserve protected spaces in locker rooms and on the playing field. And she did it without the carefully crafted, focus-grouped, corporation-approved language that the WNBA usually demands from its players. She spoke plainly, she spoke directly, and she absolutely refused to soften the message for anyone. I think it's kind of common sense, she told reporters, completely unfazed by the room full of cameras pointed directly at her face. I think it's really important to protect children. Now, some corners of the internet tried to paint her as something she's not. There were immediate attempts to reduce her to a political caricature, with critics flooding social media and sports commentary channels, trying to dismiss everything she said without engaging with a single word of it. The pressure to apologize came fast, and it came loud. Reporters cornered her before games, on the way to the bus, and in front of the cameras, all of them expecting her to fold, to walk it back, to give them the soft non-answer that would make the controversy disappear. But Sophie Cunningham doesn't fold. She looked directly into those cameras and said 4 words that immediately became the most talked about sentence in women's basketball. "I said what I said." The crowd online went absolutely berserk. Millions of fans across the country celebrated her for having the kind of backbone that most professional athletes simply don't possess anymore. She became, overnight, one of the most talked about athletes in America. And that was the moment the Indiana Fever front office started to get very, very nervous. But the fans cheering her name had no idea what was allegedly already being planned behind closed doors. And what reportedly came next would make the original controversy look like a minor footnote.
And so I stand on what I said, and I always believe that.
Yeah, do you see your advocacy on that, like, taking any form going forward?
I don't know. I'm not a very political person, but I do have beliefs. I have morals, and I'll always stand on those and be true to who I am. And I think people are going to take it how they want to take it, but I've never even really said anything about that. And so when it comes just to protecting young girls in sport and women in sport, I feel very strongly about that. I think that's why you have Title IX. That's why you have some of the greats in women's sports. If Title IX and women's sports weren't protected, then you wouldn't hear about any type of women in sport. And so I think in the future, it's just really important to protect.
Do you think, I guess along the line like that, it goes against perhaps, some people might say, hey, for the trans community, this could be something that could come back on us or be targeted against us. Like, how do you, I guess, view that sort of critique?
Like I said, I extend love, and I don't dislike anyone.
The thing about the WNBA is that the league has spent years carefully constructing a very specific public image. It is an image built on unity, on shared values, on the idea that every player, every coach, and every front office executive is reading from the same script. Deviation from that script is not just frowned upon inside league circles. According to people who have watched this organization operate for years, it is treated as an act of open rebellion. So when Sophie Cunningham stepped to that microphone and delivered a statement that flew directly in the face of the league's carefully managed narrative, the response from the upper levels of the organization was not support. It was not celebration of a player's right to speak her mind. According to reports that began leaking almost immediately, the response was something that looked a whole lot more like cold, calculated fury. While fans across social media were sharing clips of Cunningham's statement and flooding her mentions with messages of support, the mood inside the Fever's inner circle was reportedly doing the complete opposite. People within the organization describe an atmosphere that shifted from tense to outright hostile within hours of the statement going viral. The front office, reportedly blindsided by the national attention Cunningham's words were generating, began circulating the idea that something needed to be done. A message needed to be sent, an example needed to be made. And that is where Coach Stephanie White enters the story in a way that sources say no one inside the locker room has been able to forget. Now, let's be clear about what we know and what is being reported. What is confirmed is this: Sophie Cunningham played only 7 minutes in the first half of the game that followed her public doubling down. 7 minutes. For context, people who have followed her season closely point out that this kind of minute restriction was virtually unheard of for Cunningham in any game she suited up for all year. The number jumped out immediately to anyone paying attention, and it jumped out loud. What is alleged and framed by multiple sources as deliberately targeted punishment is that this reduction in playing time was not a basketball decision. It was reportedly a message. A cold, calculated signal from the coaching staff designed to show Sophie Cunningham and every other player watching exactly what happens when you step outside the lines the organization has drawn. The internet noticed, fans noticed, and most dangerously for the Indiana Fever, a growing number of people with access to the inside of that franchise noticed too, and they started talking. What those conversations allegedly revealed about Coach White's plan would make even the most hardened sports fans' jaw drop to the floor. Because the minute reduction, if the reports are accurate, was only the beginning. Here is what separates a great coach from a mediocre one. A great coach, when one of their players steps into the fire of public controversy, stands beside them. Not necessarily to agree with everything that was said, but to make it clear that this player is protected, that this locker room is unified, and that outside pressure will not fracture what's been built inside those walls. It's the foundational principle of team leadership, and it is something players remember for the rest of their careers, whether a coach did it or whether a coach failed to do it. By every account leaking out of the Indiana Fever's inner circle, Coach Stephanie White did not do it. According to multiple reports from people described as being directly connected to the team's internal operations, White not only failed to stand by Cunningham, she allegedly went in the opposite direction entirely. And the direction she reportedly chose was one that has left the locker room in a state that sources describe as fractured beyond easy repair. The reports, and it is critically important to frame these as reports and allegations rather than confirmed facts, describe a situation where White moved to actively discipline Cunningham in the aftermath of her viral statement. Not through any official league channel or documented process, but through the quiet, suffocating kind of punishment that coaches have wielded over players for generations. The kind that doesn't show up in any press release, but that every single player in the room can feel the moment they walk through the door. Allegations circulating from within the organization describe threats of further minute reductions. Some reports go further, suggesting that conversations happened about Cunningham's long-term role in the team's game planning, with sources claiming that White made it clear Cunningham's future involvement in key plays and critical game situations was suddenly very much in question. The message being sent, according to these accounts, was brutally simple: fall in line or get frozen out. Think about what that means for a professional athlete. Your livelihood, your visibility, your ability to show what you can do on the biggest stage available to you, all of it potentially being used as a weapon against you, not because of anything you did on the court, but because of words you said into a microphone about your personal beliefs. If these allegations are even partially accurate, it represents a stunning misuse of coaching authority and a complete collapse of the trust that any functional team is built on. But here is the thing that Stephanie White, according to those same sources, catastrophically failed to account for. The country was already watching. The story was already everywhere. And somewhere inside that locker room, another player was watching too, and she was keeping very careful score of every single move being made against her teammate. The entire situation was about to detonate in a way that no one inside the organization saw coming. There is a moment in every major controversy when the story stops being just a story and becomes something else entirely. It becomes a cultural event, a national talking point, something that breaks completely free of the original context it came from and takes on a life of its own so enormous that no organization, no PR team, and no coaching staff can contain it anymore. For the Indiana Fever, that moment arrived in the form of something that has genuinely never happened to a WNBA controversy before. The White House stepped in. Now, to understand the full weight of what that means, you need to visualize the scene inside the Fever's front office in the hours before that happened. According to reports, executives were already in damage control mode, working to craft a statement that would acknowledge Cunningham's comments without fully endorsing them, essentially trying to thread a needle that would keep everyone calm and push the story off the front page as quickly as possible. The strategy was containment. Keep it quiet. Let it blow over. Get back to basketball. And then, the political validation of Sophie Cunningham's position came crashing down from the highest level of the American government, and the containment strategy turned to ash in about 30 seconds. A wave of support from the White House, publicly backing the substance of what Cunningham had said about protecting women's sports, completely and irrevocably reframed the entire controversy. This was no longer a story about a basketball player saying something edgy to a reporter. This was now a nationally recognized position being validated at the very top of American political life. Suddenly, the Indiana Fever's plan to quietly discipline Cunningham and sweep the whole thing under the rug looked not just tone-deaf, but genuinely impossible to execute. Imagine being a head coach who has allegedly just moved to punish one of your own players for speaking her mind, only to wake up the next morning and discover that the full weight of political and cultural support for that player's position has materialized overnight, at a level so high that the idea of punishing her now looks not just wrong but potentially catastrophic for the franchise's public image. The The reported panic inside the Fever's front office was, by all accounts, very real and very visible. The carefully constructed narrative that Coach White and the organization had been trying to manage was now in pieces. And the Indiana Fever scrambled to release a statement of their own, one that tried to thread the needle between acknowledging Cunningham's right to her views and distancing the organization from the political firestorm that those views had ignited. Our players are thoughtful adults with their own perspectives and voices, the statement read, and those views are their own. It was a statement that tried to say everything without actually saying anything. And inside the locker room, it reportedly landed with the enthusiasm of a lead balloon. Because while the front office was crafting carefully worded press releases, Caitlin Clark was sitting in that locker room. And Caitlin Clark was done being careful. If you have followed Caitlin Clark's journey through her first full WNBA season, you already know that she has taken more than her fair share of abuse. Not just on the court, where the flagrant fouls and late hits that somehow kept getting brushed off by officials became a running national outrage, but off it too. Veteran players used podcasts and press conference podiums to take shots at her success. Whisper campaigns circulated suggesting that her popularity was undeserved, that it was a media creation, that she hadn't earned what she'd built. And through almost all of it, Clark largely stayed composed, at least publicly. She kept her comments measured. She let her performance do the talking. But there is a limit to how long even the most disciplined competitor can absorb that kind of treatment before something gives way. And according to multiple reports, many of which have been circulating from sources described as being directly connected to the team's internal operations, what happened in the Indiana Fever locker room in the aftermath of the Sophie Cunningham fallout pushed Caitlin Clark past that limit in a way that nobody inside the organization was prepared for. Reports describe an explosive confrontation in the locker room. Multiple sources indicate that Clark did not quietly pull a coach aside for a polite, professional conversation. According to what has been reported, she made her feelings known in terms that were impossible to misunderstand. Witnesses, according to these accounts, describe Clark rising to her feet, the sound of her locker slamming echoing through the room, her voice carrying a fury that had clearly been building for a very long time. "Are you kidding me?" she reportedly demanded, according to sources describing the exchange. "Why is it always me you try to hold back? And now you are coming for Sophie? We are done playing these games." Now, it is absolutely essential to be transparent here. This specific audio and these exact quotes are circulating through reports and social media sources, and they have not been independently verified or officially confirmed by the Indiana Fever organization. But the reports are specific, they are consistent across multiple sources, and they align with a pattern of tension that has been visibly building inside this franchise for months. What makes this alleged outburst so significant goes beyond the drama of a heated locker room confrontation. It represents, if accurate, a complete and open power shift inside the Indiana Fever. Clark was allegedly not just expressing personal frustration. She was reportedly drawing a line in the sand on behalf of her teammate, making it clear to every person in that room that if the coaching staff was going to come after Sophie Cunningham, they were going to have to answer to the face of the entire league at the same time. That is not the behavior of a player who is simply upset. That is the behavior of someone who has decided that the cost of staying quiet has become higher than the cost of speaking up. And for the Indiana Fever front office, the implications of that calculation are, by any measure, absolutely enormous. Because you can bench a role player. You cannot bench the person who is single-handedly responsible for the explosion in visibility, revenue, and cultural relevance that this league has experienced over the past year. Everyone in that building knows it. And according to reports, Caitlin Clark made absolutely sure they didn't forget it in that moment. Just when it seemed like the Indiana Fever could not possibly absorb any more chaos, a second story broke from inside the organization that had absolutely nothing to do with Sophie Cunningham's statement or Caitlin Clark's locker room confrontation, and yet somehow managed to make the entire situation dramatically worse. Brianna Turner, a member of the Indiana Fever organization, went on record to reveal that a staff member had been fired from the franchise, specifically over allegations of sexual harassment. The revelation landed like a depth charge inside an organization that was already taking water from every possible direction. The Indiana Fever moved quickly. Within 12 hours of Turner's revelation becoming public, the franchise released an official statement. Protecting our players and employees and maintaining a respectful professional workplace is our top priority, the statement read. Our policy is to take concerns seriously, investigate thoroughly, and act promptly when appropriate to protect the people in our organization, and ensure everyone is treated with professionalism and respect. Fostering trust and safety in that process means we do not comment on personnel matters involving former employees. Now, on the surface, that statement reads like exactly what you'd expect from any organization managing a sensitive internal matter. It's careful, it's corporate, and it reveals absolutely nothing beyond the fact that someone was fired, and the franchise is not going to be telling you who it was or precisely what they did. Which is, frankly, what made the reaction online immediately and completely explosive. Because the moment you tell the internet that something serious happened, but you're not going to give them any details, the internet does not shrug and move on. The internet starts speculating, loudly and at great length, and the speculation almost always ends up being more damaging to an organization's reputation than the actual facts would have been if they'd simply been disclosed clearly from the beginning. Within hours of the Fever's statement dropping, social media was flooded with names being thrown around, theories being constructed, timelines being pieced together, and accusations flying in every direction. The franchise, by trying to protect itself through silence, had inadvertently created a vacuum that the collective imagination of thousands of fans and commentators was more than happy to fill. And here is the detail that no one inside the Indiana Fever front office can feel great about. Fans and media observers quickly noticed something that felt uncomfortably revealing about the timing. The Fever responded to the Sophie Cunningham controversy within 24 hours. They responded to the Brianna Turner sexual harassment revelation within 12. Draw from that whatever conclusions you like, but the speed and the prioritization of those responses is something that a lot of people noticed, and very few of them interpreted it favorably for the organization. What the sexual harassment revelation added to an already devastating week was a sense that the problems inside this franchise go far deeper than a public disagreement about beliefs and a reported coaching power struggle. It suggested that the locker room environment, the workplace culture, and the internal accountability structures of the Indiana Fever were all under serious questions simultaneously. And for a franchise that is supposed to be building towards something historic around one of the most iconic young players in the sport, that is a deeply alarming picture. But even with all of that on the table, the story was not finished yet, because the front office still had to face the cameras, and what happened when they did revealed just how badly the damage had already been done. When an organization finds itself releasing two separate crisis statements within 24 hours of each other on two completely different but equally explosive scandals, you are no longer watching a PR strategy in action. You are watching a PR strategy actively failing in real time, and everybody with a clear view of what is happening can see it. The Indiana Fever's dual statement strategy revealed something important about the state of the franchise that no carefully worded corporate language could actually disguise. Speed of response is supposed to signal control. It is supposed to communicate that the organization is on top of things, that leadership is clear-eyed and decisive, and that the situation is being managed from a position of authority. But when you are responding that quickly to two different crises in the same week, speed doesn't signal control. It signals chaos. It signals an organization that is reacting, not leading, putting out fires rather than running a basketball operation. And the content of those statements made the picture even more uncomfortable. The Cunningham statement, "Our players are thoughtful adults with their own perspectives and voices, and those views are their own," was specifically designed to distance the franchise from Cunningham's comments without condemning them, a careful middle ground approach that managed to satisfy almost nobody. It didn't offer Cunningham the full organizational support that many of her defenders felt she deserved. And it didn't go far enough in the other direction to satisfy those who felt the franchise should have taken a firmer stance against what she said. It was the kind of statement that organizations release when they are more focused on surviving a news cycle than on actually standing for something. The sexual harassment statement had the same quality of careful nothing. Every word was chosen to reveal as little as possible while still technically addressing the fact that something had happened. And while that approach is understandable from a legal and HR perspective, from a public trust perspective, it was essentially gasoline on an already roaring fire. what the back-to-back statements actually communicated to the fan base, and more critically, to the players inside that locker room, was that the franchise's leadership does not have a firm grip on what is happening inside its own walls. And in professional sports, particularly in a league as small and tight-knit as the WNBA, that loss of perceived control by the front office creates a vacuum. And vacuums in sports locker rooms get filled very quickly, usually not by the people in charge. The question of where authority inside the Indiana Fever actually resides right now is one that multiple observers, fans, and analysts have been loudly asking all week. Is it with head coach Stephanie White, whose alleged decisions around Cunningham's playing time have reportedly devastated her credibility in the room? Is it with the front office, whose statements have satisfied no one and whose internal management of a harassment situation is now being publicly questioned? Or has it effectively shifted, as some reports strongly suggest, to the players themselves, specifically to the alliance that Clark and Cunningham appear to have formed in the eye of the storm? Reports claiming that Clark essentially staged a mutiny against the coaching staff represent, if accurate, something that the Indiana Fever front office genuinely cannot afford to let stand unaddressed. Because a locker room where the most powerful player has openly and explosively challenged the authority of the head coach is not a locker room that wins playoff games. It is a locker room that implodes. And the Fever, with everything they have theoretically built around Clark's extraordinary talent and marketability, cannot afford to let that happen. So what comes next? Does the front office make a move? Does Stephanie White's position become untenable? Does Sophie Cunningham find her minutes restored, or does the alleged retaliation continue? And perhaps most critically, does Caitlin Clark's reported outburst mark the beginning of a new power structure inside this franchise, or was it a moment of heat that ultimately changes nothing? The basketball world is watching, and it is watching very, very closely. Here is the brutal truth about everything that just happened inside the Indiana Fever. This was never really just about a locker room argument or a controversial statement to the press. What we have watched unfold over the past week is the visible, public collapse of trust inside a franchise that was supposed to be on the verge of something historic. A player spoke her mind and allegedly faced punishment for it. A superstar reportedly refused to let that punishment stand. The White House weighed in. A harassment scandal surfaced. And two crisis PR statements in 24 hours later, the Indiana Fever looks less like a basketball team and more like an organization in freefall. The single most important question left hanging over all of this is simple. What does this do to Caitlin Clark's future with the franchise? Because if the reports are even half accurate, she just drew the most public line in the sand that any player has drawn against their own coaching staff in recent WNBA memory. Lines like that don't get quietly erased. They either permanently change the power structure or they permanently end careers. So tell me right now in the comments, do you think Stephanie White survives this? Does the Indiana Fever fire her to save the franchise? Or does this whole thing blow up before the playoffs even start? Drop your take below. I read every single comment. Hit that like button if you think Clark was right to snap. Subscribe to Clark Spotlight so you never miss another story the league is desperately trying to bury. I'll see you in the next one.